Get that homeless man out of here. This isn't a shelter, barked Victor Mercer, his voice slicing through the warm atmosphere of Harlem's Crown Diner like a cold wind. The restaurant manager's eyes narrowed at the elderly black man who stood at the counter, his worn coat hanging loosely on his thin frame, hands trembling slightly as he searched through empty pockets. The diner fell silent. The morning rush of Wall Street types and local workers paused mid-conversation, their attention drawn to the unfolding scene. The old man's shoulders hunched forward in embarrassment. "I'm sorry," he mumbled, his voice carrying the weight of dignity fighting against humiliation. "I thought I had my wallet. I just wanted some hot food before heading to the library." Victor's lip curled in disgust. "We've had enough of your kind trying to get free handouts. There's a soup kitchen 3 blocks down." Jasmine Taylor, 26, watched from behind the counter where she'd been refilling coffee mugs. 6 months at Crown Diner had taught her when to keep her head down, especially around Victor, whose reputation for firing staff on a whim was well known. But something about this situation struck a nerve, perhaps because it reminded her of her grandfather, who'd raised her after her parents died, and who had sometimes been treated with similar disrespect despite being a decorated Vietnam veteran. A table of young executives in expensive suits snickered. "These people always have some story," one of them said loudly enough for everyone to hear. Jasmine set down the coffee pot, straightened her apron, and walked purposefully to the counter. Her eyes met the old man's briefly. There was not only shame in them, but a quiet dignity that refused to be extinguished. "I'll pay for his breakfast," she announced, placing a $20 bill on the counter. The money represented nearly all her tips from the morning shift, money she needed for her evening classes at City College. Victor turned to her with fury in his eyes. "Jasmine, this isn't your business. I make the decisions here." "It's a matter of basic human decency," she replied, keeping her voice steady despite her racing heart. "And if anyone should feel ashamed right now, it's not him." The manager snatched the money with visible contempt. "Fine. 1 breakfast special coming up, courtesy of our employee who apparently thinks she runs this place now." The old man looked at Jasmine with genuine gratitude as she led him to a small table by the window. "Thank you," he whispered. "I didn't expect to find kindness today." Jasmine smiled. "My grandfather always said that kindness isn't something you expect, it's something you practice." The next morning, before her shift began, Jasmine was called into Victor's office. He sat behind his desk with a look of manufactured concern that immediately put her on alert. "Jasmine, you understand that Crown Diner is a business, not a charity," he began, not waiting for her response. "Your behavior yesterday was inappropriate and insubordinate. Worse, you humiliated management in front of our premium customers." "I paid with my own money," she argued. "This isn't about the money." His facade of calm vanished instantly. "It's about authority. You made me look weak to promote yourself as some kind of social justice warrior. That's unacceptable." When he placed the written warning form on the desk, Jasmine felt a flutter of panic. This was her 3rd job in 2 years, and the only one that allowed her the flexibility to attend evening classes and social work. The pay barely covered her rent in her shared Bronx apartment and her portion of her grandfather's medical bills, but it was all she had. "Sign this," Victor ordered, "and consider yourself on probation. 1 more incident like this and you're out." As she signed with slightly trembling hands, Jasmine noticed something odd about Victor's behavior, an unusual nervousness she hadn't seen before. His eyes kept darting to the security camera in the corner of the office, something he had never done in previous disciplinary meetings. At the end of her shift, exhausted and demoralized, Jasmine collected her things from her locker. Hidden among her belongings was a small cream-colored envelope with no identification. Inside was a $500 bill and a handwritten note that simply read, "Thank you for your kindness when no one was watching. The world needs more people like you." As Jasmine held the note, a strange feeling of being observed ran down her spine. She looked around, but she was alone in the locker room. Somehow, though, she knew this unexpected gesture wasn't just a thank you. It was the beginning of something much bigger. That night, as she prepared a simple dinner in the apartment she shared with 2 roommates, Jasmine couldn't stop thinking about the old man and the mysterious note. What intrigued her most wasn't the money, though it would help with her grandfather's medication, but the look in the old man's eyes, not just gratitude, but something deeper, like someone who had finally found what they had been searching for after a long journey. In the days that followed, Victor transformed the warning into a personal vendetta, scrutinizing Jasmine's every move. Table 7 still waiting. He'd whisper harshly as she balanced a heavy tray. 5 minutes late again, he'd announce loudly as she rushed in from the subway after visiting her grandfather at the VA hospital. Her co-workers began avoiding her, as if Victor's hostility was contagious. Only Tiana, a newly hired waitress, seemed immune to the forced isolation. "What you did was incredible," Tiana confessed during a rare quiet moment in the break room. "Everyone's talking about it, but nobody has the courage to say it to your face." "Talking about what exactly?" "Victor has a nickname among the staff, the Executioner. It's not the first time." Tiana showed Jasmine posts in local community groups sharing similar experiences at Crown Diner. A recent review read, "Apparently we don't look wealthy enough to deserve service at this establishment." "Why doesn't anyone report him?" Jasmine asked. "The owner never shows up, and Victor is his nephew," Tiana explained, lowering her voice. "Plus, he controls schedules and tip assignments. Anyone who complains mysteriously ends up with the worst shifts or gets pushed out." That's when a man in an impeccable charcoal suit entered the diner. Jasmine noticed him immediately, not because of his expensive clothes or the subtle aura of authority he carried, but because of his eyes. They were the same as the old man's, deep, observant, with a hint of sadness, but in a completely transformed face. No weathered wrinkles, no unkempt gray beard, just perfectly trimmed salt and pepper hair and an upright posture that commanded attention without demanding it. Victor, spotting what appeared to be a wealthy customer, approached with an obsequious smile Jasmine had never seen before. "Welcome to Crown Diner, sir. May I recommend our special reserve coffee? It's not on the menu. We save it for our distinguished guests." The man smiled politely. "Thank you. Is the waitress who helped an elderly gentleman here a few days ago working today?" Victor's smile froze. "I'm sorry, sir, but I don't recall the incident you're referring to. I'd be happy to serve you personally." "I insist," the man said firmly. "I would like to be served by her." Victor called Jasmine over with a stiff gesture. "This gentleman is asking for you." The man extended his hand. "Pleased to meet you formally, Jasmine. I'm Alexander Blackwell." The name hit Jasmine like a physical force. Alexander Blackwell, the reclusive billionaire philanthropist whose foundation had transformed urban education and healthcare across the country. The same man she had defended, disguised as a homeless elder. "I'd like to invite you for a conversation," he said, handing her a business card embossed with a simple black B against a platinum background. "This isn't about a job offer, it's about something far more significant." That evening, researching online, Jasmine discovered that Blackwell wasn't just wealthy, he was legendary for his unconventional approach to philanthropy. Unlike other billionaires who donated to established institutions, Blackwell invested directly in people and communities overlooked by traditional charity. More intriguing, he owned Monarch Hospitality Group, which operated a chain of upscale diners that competed directly with Crown Diner's parent company. Before launching new community initiatives, Blackwell was known to personally evaluate neighborhoods and businesses, often in disguise, to observe authentic behavior rather than the performative kindness people showed when they knew who he was. This approach had been dubbed the Blackwell method by the business press. The next morning, a courier delivered a package to Jasmine's apartment. Inside, along with an invitation to meet at the Waldorf Astoria, were old photographs of Crown Diner. The images showed an original 1940 establishment with Taylor's Soul Food emblazoned across the front. A handwritten note read, "Your grandfather was right about kindness, and perhaps you should know that this place has a history someone wants to keep hidden from you." Jasmine stared at the photos with trembling hands. Taylor, her last name. Coincidence or connection? That evening, returning from her classes, Jasmine found a USB drive in her locker with a label that read, "Watch before tomorrow's meeting." At home, she discovered 3 files. Historical records showing that the diner had originally belonged to the Taylor family in the 1940s, recent documentation of discriminatory practices at Crown Diner, and most shocking of all, A business agreement dated 1953, proving that the restaurant had never been legitimately sold but was stolen through fraud when her great-grandfather James Taylor was hospitalized after a racist attack. Jasmine sat in stunned silence, absorbing the revelation. This place where she had been treated like an outsider, where she had to fight for basic respect, had been built by her own family. A legacy stolen through systemic racism that, 7 decades later, might finally be reclaimed. Her phone buzzed with a text from Tiana. "Victor is freaking out. Corporate sending inspectors tomorrow. Serious allegations about discrimination. What did you do?" As she composed her reply, Jasmine felt something crystallize within her, not impulsive anger, but a steady, powerful resolve. In the dim light of her small bedroom, laptop illuminating her face, Jasmine Taylor no longer looked like a struggling waitress, but a woman preparing to reclaim her stolen heritage. "When justice takes 70 years, she whispered to herself, its arrival must be perfect. The Waldorf Astoria's opulence made Jasmine acutely aware of her simple dress, the only formal outfit she owned. As she crossed the marble lobby, she felt eyes questioning her presence in such a rarefied space. Alexander Blackwell waited in a private meeting room, standing by the window. He wasn't alone. A black woman in her 50s with elegant gray braids and a younger man with wire-rimmed glasses rose when she entered. "Jasmine Taylor, meet Dr. Elise Washington, my foundation's legal director, and Marcus Chen, an expert in historical property rights and restorative justice," Blackwell introduced. "We've reviewed the documents," Dr. Washington said, her tone direct but compassionate. "The 1953 contract is unquestionably fraudulent. Your great-grandfather James Taylor never sold Crown Diner, then called Taylor's Soul Food. It was taken from him while he was hospitalized after being attacked for serving white and black customers at the same counter. This pattern was unfortunately common," Marcus added, adjusting his glasses. "During the post-war period through the civil rights era, many black-owned businesses were appropriated through various forms of legal manipulation. The system was designed to ensure these cases would never receive proper judicial review." Jasmine absorbed the information as slides appeared on a digital screen, images of the original diner, property deeds, and a meticulously traced timeline showing how the Mercer family had systematically erased the Taylors' contribution to Harlem's culinary history. "The question is," Blackwell said, sitting across from her, "what do you want to do with this information?" Meanwhile, at Crown Diner, Victor faced his own nightmare. 2 executives from corporate headquarters had arrived unannounced, demanding access to hiring records, customer complaints, and security footage. "It's just a routine compliance check," one assured him, though her tone suggested otherwise. While searching for the requested files, Victor discovered something disturbing, an old folder labeled Taylor that he had never seen before. Inside were black and white photographs of the original diner with a proud black family posed in front of the entrance. His phone rang. "Victor Mercer," he answered, trying to sound confident. "Mr. Mercer," the voice was cold, professional. "This is the legal department of Monarch Hospitality Group. We are notifying you of pending legal action regarding the property currently operating as Crown Diner, formerly Taylor's Soul Food." Victor's blood ran cold. He hung up and immediately called his uncle, Gerald Mercer, the regional director of the corporation. "Uncle Gerald, we have a problem," he said, his voice shaking. "Something about the diner, about the Taylors." There was a long silence. "Who found out?" "The waitress, Jasmine Taylor." Another silence. "How much does she know?" "Everything, apparently, and she has Alexander Blackwell backing her." His uncle's heavy breathing was the only response for several seconds. "Come to my office. Now." 3 hours later, Jasmine returned to Crown Diner accompanied by Alexander Blackwell, his legal team, and a documentary film crew. Regular customers watched with curiosity as the group settled at a central table. Victor emerged from his office, his face ashen, with Gerald Mercer at his side, taller, older, but with the same expression of entitled arrogance that characterized his nephew. "Mr. Blackwell," Gerald greeted with a forced smile. "To what do we owe this unexpected visit?" Blackwell didn't answer. Instead, he nodded to Jasmine. She stood up, calm and determined. "Mr. Mercer, I'd like to show you and everyone here something important." With a click of a remote, the lights dimmed and a projector illuminated the main wall. The first image showed the original 1940s establishment, Taylor's Soul Food, clearly visible on the facade, with Jasmine's family proudly gathered in front. "This diner was built by James Taylor, my great-grandfather," Jasmine announced, her voice surprisingly steady. It was one of the first establishments in Harlem to serve all customers equally, regardless of race, at a time when that was revolutionary. The images advanced: documents, letters, the fraudulent contract signed while James was hospitalized. "When my great-grandfather was attacked by white supremacists for his integration policy and hospitalized, Harold Mercer, your father." She looked directly at Gerald. "Forged documents transferring ownership to the Mercer family. The diner was never sold, it was stolen." Murmurs rippled through the establishment. Tiana and other employees watched, wide-eyed. Gerald Mercer took a step forward, but Victor stopped him, his eyes fixed on a new image on the screen, his own email sent to corporate headquarters a year earlier. "Found old documents about original acquisition of property. Potential legal issue with Taylor family. Recommend destroy and deny knowledge if questioned." The silence was absolute. Victor stared at Jasmine with a mixture of shock and rage. "How did you get access to private corporate communications?" he demanded. "Apparently," she replied simply, "someone in your IT department has a conscience." Gerald regained his composure first. "These are baseless allegations. Documents can be forged. Stories can be fabricated." That's when Alexander Blackwell finally spoke, his calm voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "That's why we invited these people, too." The main doors opened and cameras from major news networks entered, followed by journalists and, most surprisingly, the CEO of Crown Hospitality Group. "Mr. Mercer," the CEO said with calculated coldness, "it appears we have a serious historical liability issue on our hands." Gerald's face flushed red. "Jonathan, we can handle this internally." "It's well beyond that stage," the CEO interrupted. Turning to the cameras, he continued, "As CEO of Crown Hospitality Group, I am deeply troubled by these findings. We are launching a full investigation and are committed to addressing any historical injustices that may be identified." Victor staggered backward, leaning against the counter. "This is going to destroy us," he whispered. Jasmine watched him, not with triumph, but with quiet resolve. "No," she replied, low enough for only him to hear. "This will restore something that should never have been taken away." As cameras rolled and reporters asked questions, Jasmine remained composed, her gaze occasionally meeting Blackwell's. The man who had entered her life as a humiliated elder now offered her a slight nod of approval. The diner had never been so quiet, yet so full of contained energy. The sound of 7 decades of injustice finally being confronted in the light of day. That night, as the story dominated local news, Jasmine sat in her grandfather's small VA hospital room, watching him sleep peacefully for the first time in months. A story of theft and erasure was being rewritten, not with vengeance, but with truth. And that truth, Jasmine realized as she turned off the TV, was just the beginning of something much larger than she had imagined when she offered $20 to a stranger in need. What Jasmine couldn't have anticipated was how deeply the roots of this injustice extended, or how her simple act of kindness would unravel a conspiracy that reached far beyond one stolen diner. 2 days after the confrontation, Jasmine received another package, this one containing her great-grandfather's journal, preserved by a former employee who had kept it hidden for decades. The entries detailed not just the theft of Taylor's Soul Food, but a systematic campaign by a group of white business owners called the Restoration Committee to eliminate black-owned businesses from what they considered premium locations throughout the city. The journal named names, prominent families whose fortunes had been built on stolen black enterprise, politicians who had facilitated the thefts, and judges who had dismissed cases brought by dispossessed owners. Among those names were several current board members of Crown Hospitality Group. Meanwhile, Victor Mercer had been suspended pending investigation, but his uncle Gerald was fighting back. He hired a prestigious PR firm to paint Jasmine as an opportunistic employee exploiting racial tensions for financial gain. Anonymous sources began suggesting to tabloids that she had orchestrated the entire scenario after learning about Blackwell's disguise method. "They're trying to rewrite the narrative," Dr. Washington warned during an emergency meeting at Blackwell Foundation headquarters. "We need to move quickly before they control the story." "I never wanted this to become so complicated," Jasmine admitted, overwhelmed by the rapidly escalating situation. "I just wanted the truth acknowledged." "The truth is rarely simple, especially when it threatens power," Blackwell replied. "But we have something they don't expect." That something was revealed the next day when Jasmine, accompanied by Blackwell's team, visited the Hall of Records. There, in the basement archives, they discovered a sealed file that had been deliberately misfiled decades ago. The original police report from the night James Taylor was attacked, naming Harold Mercer not just as a witness, but as one of the primary instigators. The document proved that the theft of Taylor's soul food wasn't an opportunistic business maneuver, but the culmination of a planned violent attack designed to remove a successful black businessman from a white area. When this evidence became public, the story exploded beyond local news to national headlines. "Stolen Legacy: How Black Businesses Were Systematically Erased from American Cities." Gerald Mercer's carefully constructed counter-narrative collapsed when 3 former employees of Crown Hospitality Group came forward with additional documents showing that the company had been aware of the fraudulent acquisitions for decades and had actively worked to suppress the information. 4 weeks after Jasmine's act of kindness toward a disguised billionaire, she stood on the steps of City Hall alongside Alexander Blackwell, her grandfather in his wheelchair beside her, as the mayor announced the creation of a business restoration commission to investigate similar cases throughout the city. "This isn't just about one diner," Jasmine told reporters. "It's about acknowledging a systematic erasure of black entrepreneurship and beginning the process of restoration." What no one at the press conference knew was that in a downtown law office, Gerald Mercer was facing his own moment of reckoning. The board of Crown Hospitality Group had voted unanimously to remove him and distance themselves from the scandal. His personal emails had been subpoenaed, revealing decades of racist communications and active suppression of evidence. "You don't understand," he told his lawyers desperately. "Everyone was doing it back then. It was just business." "Times have changed," his attorney replied coldly, "and so has what the public will tolerate." 3 months after the initial revelation, the newly renamed Taylor's Soul Food held its grand reopening. The restored 1940s facade gleamed in the morning sun as a line of customers stretched around the block. At the entrance, Jasmine cut a ribbon alongside her grandfather, whose eyes shone with tears of pride. "This space will not just be a restaurant," she announced to the gathered crowd. "It will be a center for community history and economic empowerment. Every meal served here will tell a story of resilience, and every customer will be welcomed with the dignity that every human being deserves." Applause echoed down the street. Among the crowd, Tiana smiled broadly, now the operations manager of the restored establishment. Several former Crown Diner employees had been rehired with improved wages and benefits. That afternoon, after the crowd dispersed, Jasmine found Alexander Blackwell sitting alone at a corner table, watching the first customers enjoy their meals. "Why do you test people like that?" She finally asked the question that had puzzled her from the beginning. "Disguised as someone in need?" Blackwell gazed thoughtfully at his coffee. "When you have wealth, Jasmine, people show you only what they think you want to see. Perfect masks. I never know who they truly are until they believe there's nothing to gain from kindness." "And what did you gain from all this?" she asked. "Hope," he replied simply. "The confirmation that there are still people willing to do the right thing even when no one is watching." What Blackwell didn't share was his own personal connection to the story, how his grandfather, a white business owner, had been part of the Restoration Committee before having a change of heart and secretly helping several black business owners protect their properties. The Blackwell fortune had been built partly on atonement, a history that had shaped Alexander's approach to wealth and responsibility. The following week, Taylor's Soul Food opened a permanent exhibition in its back room, a wall dedicated to documenting the history of the establishment from its founding to its theft and finally its restoration. In the center, an enlarged photograph showed James Taylor standing proudly in front of the original diner. Gerald Mercer, as part of the settlement agreement, was required to attend the exhibition opening. He stood uncomfortably in a corner as visitors occasionally glanced his way, recognizing him from news reports. At one point, Jasmine deliberately approached him. He stiffened visibly. "Miss Taylor, do you know why I didn't pursue criminal charges against your family?" she interrupted, "even though I had sufficient evidence." Gerald shook his head, unable to maintain eye contact. "Because this wasn't about revenge. It was about restoration, about truth." She paused. "And truth, unlike property or power, can never be stolen, only temporarily hidden." 6 months later, Business Ethics magazine published a profile of Jasmine, highlighting her as an example of a new generation of leaders committed to economic justice. That same month, Victor Mercer, unable to find work in the hospitality industry, began working as a dishwasher in a small restaurant in Queens. "What would you do differently?" a reporter asked Jasmine during an interview, "if you could go back to that day in the diner?" Jasmine smiled. "Absolutely nothing. Every moment of that confrontation led exactly where it needed to go." What the article didn't mention was the Blackwell Foundation's new initiative, the Business Legacy Project, which had already identified 17 other cases of fraudulently acquired Black-owned businesses across 5 Black-owned businesses. States. Or that Jasmine, having completed her social work degree, now directed the project, using her personal experience to guide other families through the process of reclaiming their stolen legacies. On the 1-year anniversary of her encounter with the disguised billionaire, Jasmine visited a small diner in Queens where Victor Mercer now worked. He didn't notice her at first, as he cleared tables with the mechanical movements of someone going through the motions of life without truly living it. When he finally saw her, he froze, a stack of dirty dishes in his hands. "What are you doing here? Come to gloat?" he asked bitterly. "No," she replied, placing an envelope on the table. "I came to offer you something no one offered my great-grandfather, a choice." Inside the envelope was an application for the business ethics training program run by the Blackwell Foundation, which helped former executives understand the historical context of business discrimination and train them to become corporate ethics officers. "Why would you help me after what I did?" Victor asked, genuinely confused. "Because breaking cycles of injustice requires more than just switching who has power," Jasmine explained. "It requires creating new patterns altogether." As she left the diner, her phone rang. Alexander Blackwell calling with news that the Business Legacy Project had secured federal funding to expand nationwide. "None of this would have happened if you hadn't bought breakfast for a homeless old man," he remarked. "Or if you hadn't been that homeless old man," she countered with a smile. That evening, as Jasmine helped her grandfather into bed in their new apartment, purchased with her portion of the settlement, he took her hand. "Your parents would be so proud," he said softly. "Not just of what you accomplished, but of how you did it, with dignity and without becoming what you were fighting against." Jasmine kissed his forehead. "I had a good teacher." As she turned off the light, she thought about the chain of events that had led to this moment, how a simple act of kindness had cascaded into a movement for historical justice that was now spreading across the country. How defending an elderly customer had led to reclaiming not just a family legacy, but the erased histories of countless others. Sometimes, the most powerful revolutions begin not with grand gestures, but with small moments of human decency when no one important seems to be watching. Or perhaps, as Jasmine had learned, those are precisely the moments when the most important eyes are upon us, seeing not who we pretend to be, but who we truly are.